Hello, everybody, and welcome to Club Moffat Talks. I am Joseph McNeely, and I'll be one of your hosts today. I'm an instruction librarian. Wow. It's going to
Librarian.
be that kind of episode.
It is.
Librarian here at Moffat. And we have other people.
I am Ryan Samuelson. I'm the associate university librarian here at Moffat Library. With us today, not with us today, is Christy Pineda, who is unfortunately on jury duty. We'll see if he gets a case or not, but he is not here today. We do ever have a fantastic guest.
Hi there. I'm your guest host today, Jonathon Quam. I'm a professor of documentary film production and digital film production.
Awesome. Okay, we're going to be talking about movies today, and that's why we've specifically asked you, Jonathan, to be here with us.
This
Um,
kind of spawned out of last week, didn't it? We were talking about
it did,
movies and
it did. Our last episode, we were discussing holiday films and what makes a movie be a holiday film, and we had differing opinions about that. And then we said, we should talk about the difference between an important film and a good film, because I think that those are very much not necessarily the same things. And I do want to talk about that. But before we talk about that, we'll ease into things with just a little bit of a, hey, how's your life going? What are you doing? What are you reading? What are you watching? Uh, do you want to go first, Ryan? So show how
sure,
it's
I'll go
going.
first. I am watching the final season of Lower Decks, which is one of the far better Star Trek show than it really should be. I mean, you can tell the people there just absolutely love the entire franchise, and the jokes. There are tons of little Easter eggs all throughout the series, and they're doing their last season this year, and that's what I've been watching lately. Haven't been reading much. And I've mostly been adapting to a bunch of new medication that I'm on. Yay.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Uh, Jonathan, what have you been reading or watching when you're not busy working?
I mean, I guess it's never ending on my end. So many TV shows. I love to watch shows while I run and try to fit in everything I can't watch at home there. So, trying to catch up on the final season of Umbrella Academy, Terminator Zero. What else? I tried running to Lord of the Rings. That was a really long show to try and get
Yeah.
to. But I mean, I try to take it all in as I tell my students, if you want to get better at this, you have to engage with it, you have to watch it, you have to dissect it. But my favorite stuff recently, music wise, I'm a never-ending record collector.
Mm,
And I was introduced to this band, Dame Area, just last week, and their record has turned out to be one of my favorite of the year so far.
okay. I'm not familiar with them. I'll have to
Oh,
check it out.
very Suicide-esque, the late 70s.
Oh,
Electronic punk band.
okay. Okay. I could get into that. Um, let's see. I had watched the previous seasons of Lower Decks, and so I'm sure that I will watch it, but I haven't started that yet. I did watch Umbrella Academy. I loved it. Um, my wife and I are continuing to read through the Wheel of Time series. We like to do a chapter a night. Um, and let's see what else. I have a few things on my to watch list that I haven't started yet. We had watched the first season of the animated Arcane, based on the was it League of Legends video game, and the second season has come out, and we were like, we're going to have to completely rewatch the first season before we start that second season because we've slept since then. We don't remember. And so we haven't started that yet. Here at the library, every month we get a new selection, about a dozen books from a company called Junior Library Guild. And I always like to read one of them at least each month. And I did read one this month, this one that's a Lone Wolf Gets a Pet. Um, and I read another Lone Wolf book a few months ago that was like Lone Wolf Goes to School, and I didn't really care for that one. I'm afraid I'm not a huge fan of this main character of the Lone Wolf. He's a very, very grumpy, very leave me alone and just let me be my by myself kind of person. So it's kind of hard to love the character. Um, this one I felt like was a better story, in some ways, a little bit more relatable, uh, because he decides that he's needs to get a pet so he can enter a pet competition specifically because he wants to win the prize, not because he cares about having a pet. And so he like tries out having different pets in this story. It's cute. It's cute. Um, that was way shorter than the amount of time we usually spend
That you
on
had
talking about
allotted
the
for
things
Oh,
that
it.
we're doing.
Well, we can talk
well,
about other things.
I already regret not mentioning the book I'm reading right now, so I'm going to
Oh,
throw one
Oh,
out
go
there
ahead.
too. I finally got a copy of The Doll Who Ate His Mother from Ramsey Campbell. It's a late 70s horror novel out of
I know
England.
who Ramsey Campbell is. Yeah.
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 I'd always read that this was one of the best books he ever put together, but I could never find like a repress of it. So I went hunting a few weeks ago and now I'm about halfway through. Love it.
Cool.
Yeah, I've actually, if you look behind me, you'll see a whole bunch of weird fiction because I actually taught a weird fiction class with Peter Fields last year. So
Oh, nice. Yeah, see, I've grown to appreciate a local hero in my hometown. So, like Ramsey Campbell talked about his start coming from sending his short stories to August Derleth to have him edit them because he edited a lot of those Fantastic Tales magazines, Amazing Stories. And growing up, August Derleth was famous in our town for having lived in my hometown
Hmm.
for a long period of time. And I only knew him as this guy who wrote cute books about prairie animals, realizing that there was this whole massive science fiction horror side that he's responsible for.
Okay. That's cool. I I just had a disappointing thing with the book. Um, I had been reading the Dresden Files series by Jim Butcher and really, really enjoying them. And then I did a thing where I had finished one actually like December of last year, like a whole 12 months ago. And unlike the previous ones, that particular one ended on a cliffhanger. But my family gave me a bunch of books at Christmas, and I was like, okay, I'm not going to get the next Dresden book until I've read through all of these other things in my to be read pile. So I got the next one recently, and I started it, and it picked up pretty well right after the cliffhanger-ness of the previous one. And I couldn't get into it. I didn't like it. I didn't like the way that the story was heading. Uh, I mean, I gave it more than a few pages. I went a few chapters into it, and I was just all like, I'm not enjoying this the way that I had enjoyed the previous ones. Uh, and I had gotten it through Interlibrary Loan. Everybody use Interlibrary Loan. It's your best friend. I sent it back because I was like, I'm not into it. But yeah, that was my disappointing book story.
Do any of them ever turn around where like half a year from now or in year later you think about it and it makes you come back?
I mean, it might do. I I don't want to spoil the storyline for anyone, and it would be really easy to spoil the storyline because there's a very specific kind of traumatic things that happened in the one book leading into this one. And it was just like I felt like it was kind of a change of tone, maybe a I don't know. It felt different than the preceding ones that I had liked so well. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's possible that sometime in the future I'd be like, well, maybe I was just in the wrong mindset for it, and I can pick it up and go, okay, I see where they were going with this. It's like I was had a mental block about it the first time I picked it up, but it's like, okay, this actually isn't bad. I was just in a grumpy mood when I was reading it. I mean, that's a thing that can happen.
What
Sure.
I usually do, and a lot of people view this as anathema, is if I'm reading something and I'm several chapters into it and it's not working for me, I will go and I'll read the last chapter. And if I go, oh my God, how did they get to this point? It can reinvigorate me to actually read the book. And sometimes I read it and I go, yeah, that's where I thought it was going, and then I don't read the book, read the story at all.
I I have a non-book corollary to that. Um, I I had been watching the Supernatural TV series, um, and I watched a lot of it. I did not watch all of it because I kept getting mad about the flaws in the storyline and giant plot holes and things. So I just stopped watching it and kept being amazed that it kept going and going and going. So I went and found it streaming and did not try to rewatch, or do the catch up. I just went to the last episode, the actual last episode of the series, and watched it. And I was like, okay, just yeah, that's kind of what I thought they were going to do, you know.
If you've never seen 6 Feet Under, I recommend you try the exact same thing.
Oh yeah, just skip to the last one.
Yeah, no, you won't be disappointed.
Okay, okay.
I have watched 6 Feet Under, but I don't remember a dang thing about it, unfortunately.
I don't want to say ruin that finale that came out, I don't know, what, 15 years ago. For anyone who's never seen it, it's crushing and beautiful.
Okay. Okay. Um, I mean that's a whole other thing that we could talk about series
Yeah.
finales. But we'll save that for another time.
Or if we have time today, we can talk about it. I mean, who knows?
Okay, I have a bad habit of watching entire series that I love, and when I get to the finale, I can't do it. I can't commit because I don't want it to be over.
Uh,
So I've never seen the final episode of Atlanta. I've never seen the final episode of Reservation Dogs. All these great shows. I just can't end my relationship with them.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, it's weird to okay. It's weird to me sometimes the thing with finales where actually I feel this way about book series too. Sometimes the last one can ruin the rest of it for you. Uh, if it doesn't if you feel like that it doesn't make sense or doesn't gel with the things that had been done previously.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had some book series and some TV series that I felt like were ruined by the ending. But
I'll just say that I'm one of those people that does not like the never-ending franchise um, book series. I think that's something that came out in the 90s, and I think it was a way for basically publishers to make money. And the public loves it. The public loves the never-ending franchise book stuff. I love endings. I love endings to stories. I love finales to books and stuff like that. And it really made me mad that there are all these series out there, like Wheel of Time, that kept going on and on and on and on and on and on, just to make money to some extent, just because, and because people didn't want it to end. People didn't want the story to end. They wanted to keep reading about their favorite characters, and I can understand that. But I always viewed a story as with the beginning, a middle, and an end. And if you lose any part of that, it's not a real story for me.
yeah, uh, a thing that I have enjoyed that is in some ways the thing that you hate, and in some ways isn't, is oh, I want to get this right. I think it's Kelly Armstrong. She has the Otherworld series. She has this universe, and it seems to be like this ongoing story, but she doesn't revisit the same character in each book.
Mm.
Like the It's urban fantasy which is my jam. I love that. And the first book is about werewolves, but then the second book is about witches, you know, and there's characters that you will meet in one book that'll show up in the next one and things like that. And you will revisit previous characters and go, okay, what's going on with them now? So, but it's not that following one person for 20 books. And I do like that.
Well,
Another
the shared universe idea is an old one, and then
Sure.
I've always enjoyed that. I mean,
Yeah. Another thing that I can enjoy is, and like Reardon does this with his youth books, like the Percy Jackson, the Olympians, those books, where he'll do like a trilogy, and that trilogy stands on its own. Boom. And then a few years later, do another trilogy, maybe from a different viewpoint, looking at different characters or whatever. So it is a little bit of that shared universe thing, but it's not the continuing on and on and on. It's like you're going to get this number of books. And I appreciate both of those
hmm.
ways of dealing with it.
Yeah. I can't say I'm completely against the never-ending stories in some areas. I would love to see the TV show It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia keep going until those guys are in their 60s. I don't need their stories to ever have an end, but I'm with you on a lot of other series, movies. They need to bring a conclusion in,
Yeah.
you know. Otherwise, they run the risk of diminishing returns over
Oh
time
yeah.
when you start to tell the same stories again and again and again with different
Well,
characters.
there's the most famous stories of things like Lost or Heroes, where they planned for the first season, but they had no idea what to do after that type of idea.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of television series that have fallen apart because of that.
Yeah, no. It's one of the reasons I can respect a creator who really wants to bring the series to a close on their own terms
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
successfully does so.
Yeah.
But I'm up for talking about movies and films, and I'm so curious to hear your guys' thoughts on what an important movie or an important film is versus a good film.
We
Yeah.
talked about it briefly just before we came in, and I mentioned things like there are films like The Battleship Potemkin, there are films like Citizen Kane, which are important because they were the first. They did certain techniques or they did certain aspects that no one had ever done before. Now both of those are good films, but but I'm sure there is stuff out there where somebody was experimenting with something and did something new and unique, and the film is important because of that, but it may not be necessarily entertaining, or it may not be a fun film to watch type of idea. I think is what Joe was going for.
It's interesting because for
Go ahead, John.
does a movie have to be fun for you?
No, it does not. It doesn't for me.
I I don't mind if okay. I enjoy a fun movie, but by that I don't necessarily mean that it needs to be comedic.
Mhm.
I mean, um, okay, I'll throw this one out there. I think that The Princess Bride is a great movie. It has some plot holes and some story problems, but it has action and romance and mystery, a little bit of horror. So it has all of these interesting story elements that work together and create a fairly unified whole. So I think that that's a really good movie. I don't know that it's an important movie or, if it's something that's destined to be in, the top 100 movies you must see before you die or whatever. But I think that that's a great movie. Now, like I said, because they didn't necessarily do anything particularly innovative with it, it may not be an important movie, but it's a good movie.
Okay. I mean, in the end, I'm going to say something incredibly controversial here, and that's
Go ahead.
also subjective.
Sure.
Honestly, that I mean, it's the simple truth. Like, what's important to one person or what they deem important. Like, and I get it. There are film scholars out there who are going to write on end about the movies that change the world in different ways, or push genres in different ways. And then it can be so small and so big all at once. You have your big movies like Citizen Kane, but then you have your other types of big movies, but other people wouldn't see them in the same way. Like, in terms of that idea of a movie that pushes the boundaries, for me, a movie like Halloween does that just as well as Citizen Kane.
Mhm.
And now they're completely different types of movies. And I know there are plenty of people who wouldn't put them into the same discussion, but Halloween is to the horror genre in terms of what it solidified and how it got under our skin in a brand new way. And yeah, it built on things that came before it, but it set in motion um, whole new subgenres of horror.
Mhm.
No, that's important too. The creation of subgenres and genres of film is also, I would consider, very much an important film. And I agree with you. Halloween did create an entire subgenre of horror that hadn't really, it'd been danced around a little bit, but hadn't been really seen before.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was younger, my friends and I would always have that debate of like, is it a movie or a film? And, I think we wanted to, I don't know, like pat ourselves on the back for our taste some. And then, over the last 16 to 18 years of my life, I've engaged in so many areas where I went from I love horror to I only want to watch these dramatic films to I only want to watch emotionally traumatizing films and back to horror. And
Mhm.
um, I don't have an answer as to what separates it. It's just down to I know what I like and I know what impresses me.
Well, one thing I can also say, I don't know about you, but I can respect a film without actually liking it.
Hmm.
There can be films that I may have not liked the film, but I can respect it. I can understand the artistry that went into it. I can understand the craft that went into it. It's a clever film or something along those lines. And can like that aspect of it without actually liking the film itself. So again, I think that's the difference between, at least for me, the difference between important and good. Is it a film that I respect or is it a film that I love? I mean, those are two different things. And those are different aspects of films that I can do. And I can watch both of them. I mean, I enjoy watching a film I respect but maybe don't love, and I can watch a film that I love but don't respect.
And so here, the tough thing for me, and this is true across all media that I engage with, is it's hard for me to understand importance in the moment quite a bit. Like I can understand something that's a part of the zeitgeist, something that really clicks with a global or even just say US audience and people latch onto it. But it doesn't automatically become clear to me whether or not that film or that piece of music or something is going to be important. I feel like you just need time. Like importance is one of those elements that I feel like we can only really understand from a distance. And I say that all the while knowing that there are plenty of people who would absolutely disagree, that they'll see something and in the moment say, this film is important right now.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, how many films are out there that are now considered one of the best films of all time that did horrible at the box office? Wizard of Oz tanked at the box office. I made my parents go see The Shawshank Redemption, and it was hard because people forget, but that also tanked completely at the box office. And
mhm.
by the time they went, I dragged them to go see it. There was only one theater showing it in all of DFW, and this was like the second week. That's how bad Shawshank Redemption does. And it's number one on IMDb now. So again, I think you're right. I think time and perspective is a lot because and there how many film critics are out there that basically when the film first came out they gave it a horrible review and then 10 years later they gave it a rave review. They went back and re-looked at it with a new perspective and gave it a rave review.
That's a tough one. I feel like we're seeing like a shift in some of those, like, and especially nowadays where everyone has access to their own outlet. So, start your own TikTok, YouTube channel. You can be your own kind of film critic. But Like, I feel like we're doing critical reevaluations and cultural reevaluations faster than we
Yeah.
used to.
Yeah.
So you do see those movies. I don't necessarily know that, you know, all cultural reevaluations are as warranted as others, and some certainly seem to be trying to make something out of nothing. My favorite is the attempt of the younger generations to turn the Star Wars prequels into uh classic films that we just didn't get it. And
Yeah.
that might be true. Like maybe we just forgot they were kids' films and George Lucas remembered that, but that didn't make them any better than they were.
Yeah. I I have a problem with the Star Wars universe because uh, I haven't really enjoyed any Star Wars title as much as I enjoyed the original 1970 whatever New Hope first Star Wars thing. Uh, I feel like all of them have paled in comparison. I feel like that whole universe doesn't follow its own continuity. Um, yeah. Uh, Now, having said that, I have watched almost every Star Wars title thing because I was like, well, maybe they'll get it right this time, kind of a thing.
Maybe you can guarantee 2 hours of entertainment out of any one of those titles.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, and that is a thing. It's like I I I do want to be entertained or taken out of my own space by my entertainment, whether it's a book or a TV or a movie. Sometimes my wife has this too. If something feels too realistic and too similar to the actual problems that we really do go through, people facing okay, this is a weird example, but the American version of Shameless, that TV series, I watched the first episode and never watched any more of it because it was too real for me. It's like the struggles that the family had. I was all like, I can't watch that. It's I can't watch that. It would not be entertaining for me to watch that. Um, you know. So when you have something science fiction, science fantasy, your Star Wars, your Star Trek, your Lord of the Rings, it lends itself so much more readily to being taken out of your head because it is a different place, a different time. So even then, when people are trying to deal with classism, racism, just because it's reinterpreted in that setting, you can go, okay, I can deal with this. We can deal with it in this way.
Okay. So I'm gonna push this conversation forward a little bit
Okay.
there. One, I will say you're not alone. In my film theory course, I give my students the opportunity to pick a number of their own films through short film. That way I can watch them in real time with them. But I also push a number of recent films from the last 10 years that I feel like they are a lot less likely to have seen.
Mhm.
And two of them in particular are The Florida Project and Her Smell. And I don't know if you two have seen either one of these movies.
Mm-mm.
The Florida Project was Sean Baker's second film after Tangerine. He's the one who just won Cannes with Nora this year. And it's gotten a very small US release. I have not seen it. It was in Wichita Falls for like 7 days, but I was told it was amazing. Anyway, he made The Florida Project, a movie about class struggle and poverty that looks at a fringe community that most of us in our daily life would look away from, but he's immersing us in it. And I've had a lot of students comment that it's very difficult to watch a movie that feels so real and so lived in when people are making these bad decisions and you know that they're going to lead, you know, further down. Like it gives them anxiety. And for me, that was the point of watching the movie. Like I didn't mind the anxiety and feeling and learning what this character was going through because it builds empathy to me.
Right.
But for them, it was a step too far. It felt too close, whether it be to home or just too close to something they don't want to feel. And it was the same with the film Her Smell, which is more about self-destructive behavior. Anyway, they didn't want to immerse themselves. But I was going to ask you then if, you know, like all of us, we're very drawn to entertainment and being entertained. When do you go out of your way to watch something because you think you should? Not just because you think it's going to entertain you, but because you want to see it to understand its influence uh, on, let's say, on film or on the growth of American storytelling.
Mhm. Uh,
I have a friend that we used to go see movies all the time. And we would once in a while, if there was a buzz about something, if there was a buzz about a film that was out there, and we would go see it with the parameters of we may not enjoy this film, but let's watch it for whatever that the critics are raving about, type of thing. So I have done that in the past. The truth of the matter is, I don't watch as many movies as I used to. I mean, I just don't. There was a time when I was every single weekend I was in the theater watching something new, two or three times a week. I'm going to see films, and I'm just not at that point anymore. But there was a time where it would be like, hey, I heard an interesting buzz about this. This might be interesting to see. Let's go see it, even though we might not enjoy the film.
Okay.
So I have done that before in the past, but just not recently.
uh, yeah, I don't have a great answer to that. I because if the question is when do I push myself to watch something just because I think I should, because it's culturally relevant, uh, I do it on a case by case basis. I have, and often it will be at the suggestion of one of my children, uh, usually my daughter, but my my kids are so much more politically and socially aware at their age than I was at their age, and honestly, more than I am at my own age. Um, so the way that they already view the world through a different lens than I do. And so occasionally one of them will say, I watched this thing, you should watch it. And then I will. And it may not be something that I like, but I'll watch it then. But that just comes up occasionally, you know. Uh,
Yeah, I think it's going to make more sense for people. I mean, for you to hear that, yeah, I do it a lot. Like, I tend to watch a lot of things just so that I can understand their role in this industry that I love so much, or in the styles of storytelling I love. Like,
mm,
I love documentary.
mm,
I don't think I've watched a recent feature-length documentary. Um, in the last 4 or 5 years. And I don't watch a lot of documentary series at all,
mm,
like television style documentaries. I tend to only stick with, you know, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s era documentaries that really contributed to, you know, helping the form evolve over time. And I understand there's a role for these modern films, but I don't know, because I treat it more academically. Maybe I'm just drawn, or maybe that's just the style of filmmaking I'm drawn to, and the modern filmmakers aren't making films in the same way,
yeah.
whatever it may be. But I tend to watch a lot of documentaries for the sake of seeing what this documentary did and what it was creating, and a lot less about what's the topic.
Mhm.
Like, I especially love when someone can tell me a story about a topic I don't normally connect with. Like, Anyway, I could go into detail on that one there, but I try to do it with narrative film production as well as much as possible, and even TV shows to an extent, but TV is my escape. But like narrative film, my husband loves 1940s, 50s Hollywood cinema, and I never really did. I watched a lot of Hitchcock as an undergrad because I had a film professor who loved Hitchcock, and half my class was Hitchcock. But other than that, a lot of my film history classes were Russian, German, French cinema, very little American cinema. So I just asked him on occasion, pick a 1950s film that, had a huge influence, or like I'll pick one that I know by name but had never seen for whatever reason. And I'll watch it just for that. And sometimes I learn to love it. And sometimes it's now I've seen it and I can check it off.
Right.
One thing I don't like about the 50s is the fact that at least for the big budget ones, they had to have everything. They had to have the pathos, they had to have the comedy, they had to have all aspects to it.
Mhm.
I watched Stalag 17, one of my favorite films, a year ago, and the comic relief in it just ruined it for me. I was like, this is a very serious topic. This is a very a dark film, but this comic relief that's scattered all throughout this film is really ruining this film for me. That's the only complaint I have about 50s film is the fact that they had to cover all these different bases to some extent. They had to, with their template they did with a lot of times.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not um across the board. I mean, if you're thinking like American cinema, yeah, I can see that. And I know very
Yeah, in
little
American cinema
about
is what I'm talking about mostly.
I know very little about independent cinema from the 1950s or before. But if I were you, if you're curious about where 1960s and 70s American cinema came from, explore the French film industry of the
Oh yeah, oh
1950s.
yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
I
I was going to ask, do you guys have any guilty pleasures? Because I certainly do when it comes to films. My three of my favorite films are stuff like uh, Challenge of the Five Element Ninjas, which is a Shaw Brothers Hong Kong film. One of my favorite films of all time. It's a horrible, horrible film. Uh, Another one of my favorite films that I just absolutely adore that isn't that great, Life Force. It's one of my favorite science fiction films of all time. Some people like it, but it's also a very cheesy British sci I think it's a great British science fiction type film. And I am one of those people. I'm one of the very few people in the world that loves Zardos unironically
Uh,
because it's one of the few examples of a type of science fiction, those new wave science fiction that came out in the late 60s, early 70s, a very surrealist type of science fiction. It's one of the few films that's actually in that genre. And I know what they were going for. They failed. Borman failed in trying to make that type of movie that he wanted to make. But I love the fact that he tried to make a new wave science fiction type film. Anyway, those are three films that I actually adore that are honestly horrible films.
that's interesting. Like I have similar things where I do enjoy like I think my guiltiest pleasure, because if I like a movie, I like it
Yeah.
unabashedly. Like I'm gonna tell everyone I like it. My students come to know me for my passion for horror and serious dramatic films and serious documentaries. And then I come in and start talking about having gone and seen Wicked twice in theaters, because who can resist the acting in that film? I'm just astonished at what Cynthia Erivo pulled off. Anyway, my guiltiest pleasure is what I like about bad movies. I don't like the Sharknadoes and the Thanksgivings and movies that are made deliberately bad. Like it doesn't take a lot of effort to make a bad movie. Anyone can make a bad
Yeah.
movie and people do it all the time. I don't care how terribly camp you can make this. It better be way overboard. My guilty pleasure comes from I only like bad movies where I know they tried really hard. I have to know that the filmmaker really wanted to make a good movie and it still ended up this way. And, the best example I can give you is The Room.
Ah, okay.
He really thought he was making, classic cinema. And, he might say otherwise today, but no, he was trying. and it still turned out to be the gem that it is. So I need that little bit of a twist. It's got to be something that's bad by mistake,
Yeah.
which is, terrible, I guess, as a filmmaker to say about other films.
Uh, I also love Life Force, Ryan.
Okay.
It's
Life Force is the best out of those three I mentioned, but it's still very cheesy. It's still very there's a weird British science fiction uh tone, I guess I'm trying to say, that just is off. It's just uncomfortable and off, and Life Force has that.
yeah,
Well,
it does.
the off part might be the fact that it was directed by Texas Chainsaw Massacre Toby Hooper.
Yeah, yeah.
Like he's not a British filmmaker. I have always been
I got
curious.
you, but I call it a British because
No,
it's very
it's
much in the style of what was it called? A Quartermass. It's very much in the Quartermass style of British science fiction. So
if I remember correctly, Abby, wasn't it a British production, but with
yeah,
him
yeah.
directing for whatever reason? And so I was drawn to it because I wanted to know what this movie was that Toby Hooper made, and I was not what I expected. I mean, it did have vampires, I guess.
Yeah. It's one of two movies that I talk about when people start talking about vampire movies. People be like, "Oh, I watch vampire movies. I've seen all the vampire movies." And then I'll be like, "Have you seen Life Force?" And then the other one I give them is Innocent Blood. And I love that one. And it's well, and my my favorite, currently my favorite bad movie is In the Name of the King. It's Ron Perlman, Burt Reynolds, uh, Claire Forlani. I mean, it's just all of these stars, and you're like, wait, what's happening in this movie? Like Matthew Lillard's in it, and I'm pretty sure he gives the best performance of anyone in the movie. And you're like, what, what,
When
what
was
was
this?
that?
When was this made? Is this like 13 Ghosts era Matthew
I
Lillard?
remember it coming out, and I remember it dying in the box office, but that's all I
Well,
remember.
yeah, and it's Jason Statham is the main character. Yeah, it's it's amazing. Ray Liotta. Ray Liotta's the bad guy.
I
Just
love the cast. It sounds stacked.
oh man, and I can't think of his name. The guy that played Gimli. He's in it. Just and Leela Sobieski's in it. Just all these people. Oh, it is so
Davies.
terrible, huh?
Davies.
Davies, yes. Yeah.
So then I have to ask, because going along the lines of I like a bad movie where they tried really hard. Either of you find a way to see Megalopolis yet?
I have not seen Megalopolis yet, no.
Now, I don't recommend unless you really want the entertainment or you are the contrarian type who's going to go into it thinking, no, this is genius. It's got to be. My brother could only make it through about 15 minutes before he demanded I turn it off, but it is every star you can think of um, doing their best to carry a sinking ship,
Wow.
lift a sinking ship.
Wow.
It is astonishingly like it's hard to see the filmmaker who made Apocalypse Now in this movie at all. But hey, he had $120 million of his own money to put into a movie. So
Yeah, yeah, didn't they? Yeah, yeah. I heard that they didn't. The studio kind of backed out, and so he financed it himself. Oh, wow.
he sold part of his winery.
Wow. Hmm.
Do you guys
But
have a film
I
that you can only watch once? Because I have one. I watched it once. I've never been able to watch it since then.
feel like I could go down the list of all those. Have you ever read the listicles of movies you only watch once?
The one that hits me hard is Studio Ghibli's Grave of the Fireflies.
Yep.
I tried watching it a second time. I got 10 minutes into it. I'm like, nope, can't watch it again. Can't watch
Nope.
this film again.
Nope. If you know how it ends, why would you? I've never watched Dancer in the Dark twice. I'll most likely never watch an entire Gaspar Noé film besides maybe Climax more than once. He made Irreversible and Enter the Void, those very difficult to watch movies that he's known for. He makes them very well. Most Lars von Trier films.
Yeah. I was about to say Lars von Trier's. Yeah, that's one of the names that usually pops up with that.
Yeah, and I mean, not all. Like I actually could stomach Antichrist more than once, but or Melancholia, but then you've got The House That Jack Built, and I think it took me 3 sit-downs to even watch the whole thing.
These are films you're not going to watch.
No, no. Well,
Yeah.
it's like sometimes well, because I'm so much more mature now, I'm getting over this. But I used to have a thing about not really wanting to tell people about the classic must-see American films that I have never watched, I'm never going to watch because I don't care about them. Uh, I have never watched any of the Godfather movies. I'm never going to watch any of the Godfather movies. I'm not a
I gotta
huge
say that's a shame. You would be
yeah,
surprised how entertaining they are.
yeah.
And
Uh,
I'm
no, it's well, it
I know Joe's sensibilities. They won't be as entertaining as you think they will for Joe. I know what Joe likes for his films.
I think it's just the storytelling that as- astonishes me. Like it's less about the filmmaking prowess and more about how he handles that massive narrative and like all of the themes inside it. Anyway, that's
Oh, speaking of which, I just want to point this out as too. I always get told, people always say, "Oh, the book is always better than the movie," and my response to that is, "That's someone who's never read The Godfather, who's never read Jaws, and never read Ben-Hur, because those are three films that are far better than the books are."
yeah. There are several movies that are better than the books. Blood and Chocolate, almost any version of Man in the Iron Mask. Yeah, yeah.
and I um oh, what was I gonna say to that idea? What were we talking about? Movies that we'll only watch once, and
Yeah.
then movies that maybe we'll never see.
Yeah.
See, as I've gotten older, it's become less and less likely that I'm going to see a lot of the new animated films,
Oh,
unless they're directly geared towards adults. That's not a guarantee. My husband does latch on to one or two of them every now and then, but it used to be that I would see every Pixar movie that came out, and now I don't know. I'm just fairly certain I'm not going to relate to it.
Yeah. I, I think that's fair. I think that's fair.
if you haven't seen Encanto, I'd see Encanto. That it's very, very good.
Yeah, so every time I say it, there's always one or two recommendations, and usually they're right. I will enjoy it. Like it's not. It's just when you're only got so much time on this
No,
planet,
I hear you.
you're
I
gonna see
understand.
so many movies.
Yeah.
Like I can always be surprised. I don't like the Shrek series pretty much in general. Like it's just not my thing, that jukebox musical storytelling. Um, but I really liked Puss in Boots. Like took a lot of convincing to get me to sit down for it, but once I did, I was like, okay, that was quality animation and quality storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's no Ralph Bakshi, but it's okay.
Uh,
Oh, now you got me thinking about Rotoscope.
Oh, yeah. As a movie person, have have you seen the movie Videodrome?
yeah, no, David
Oh yeah,
Cronenberg was
yeah.
like my obsession in the 19 or in my
Oh yeah,
20s.
same here. As a teenager, I was really big into Cronenberg stuff.
Yeah. I Videodrome, Naked Lunch,
Scanners.
Scanners. Well, Scanners is one of those like it borderlines. It's so goofy. It's
Yeah,
so wooden and weird, but he's finding his form and like after that, he just like classic after classic for
The
15 years.
Brood.
Rude. Yeah, no. Videodrome's amazing. I love it. It's one of those movies that required multiple watches for me just to like really try to fully understand all the dynamics that were at play.
Yeah, you're kind of going, okay, if none of it's real, then what's really going on in this scene? I
Hmm.
kept thinking that at points.
Yeah. I mean, Mulholland Drive was another one that I became a David Lynch fan because of Mulholland Drive and because it made me want to rewatch it. And I think it's fascinating that there are movies that, make themselves so um, challenging and they can be enjoyed for that challenge.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I I'm not a big documentary person. I did watch what I guess is sort of a documentary. I don't know what else to call it, which was the thing about the members of the Brat Pack.
I watched that one too. Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting. Yeah, it
I
was.
it was all right. It wasn't as good as I thought it could have been. I mean, it was very
Yeah,
much on the fly.
yeah.
It was McConaughey was the or no, not McConaughey,
It's McCarthy.
McCarthy. And it
Yeah,
was basically just him kind of throwing stuff together to see what worked. It could have done a few more passes and a little bit more structure to it, I think.
yeah. I thought it was interesting because it was an interesting view of that time period of the 80s, looking at it very specifically from their point of view.
Yeah.
And I thought that it was interesting that specifically McCarthy and Estevez just had a very, very negative view of being lumped into this Brat Pack thing, and they hated it so much. And then pretty much everyone else that he talked to was all like, eh, you
Rob
know,
Lowe loved it. I mean,
I
yeah.
yeah, it's like, oh, it was good for me. It's like, oh, or I just rolled with it, or and so it was kind of interesting to see that because it was just like, yeah, I think that maybe that should never have been as big a deal to you as it was, and maybe yeah, it's like really time to let it go. And in that way, it was a little bit like watching someone go through group therapy, like
Yeah, true.
40 years after they should have, you know. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. Is it, because to each their own on their opinion of how people write the narrative of their life.
Oh,
Like,
sure.
you look at Estevez and it would make sense that he'd be annoyed about being lumped in with the John Hughes crowd, even though he's a part of the cast.
Well, one
'Cause-
of the things you find out is that they didn't really know each other. They got lumped into
Yeah.
this group, and honestly, they were actors who had worked together, but they didn't really hang out with each other at all.
Yeah. I mean, the point I was going to make there is that prior to that, he made a film, as incredibly punk as Repo Man.
Yeah, Repo Man. Yeah.
He's very clearly not in the same mindset as, say, The Breakfast Club, even though he's getting paid to make that movie.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll throw a documentary at it. It's the last film I watched. The John Williams documentary that Steven Spielberg put out. Really, really good. What's fascinating about John Williams is all he was a famous person long before he worked on Star Wars or Jaws. That's the interesting thing for me. As I was telling um, Joe here, the Peter Gunn dun 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 dun. That's him playing the piano. That's John Williams playing the piano on that piece. He was known as jazz pianist and a composer for all sort. I mean, he wrote some of the songs for music for Gilligan's Island. He wrote some of the songs for Lost in Space. The guy did. I mean, the guy had an Oscar for Fiddler on the Roof long before Jaws came out. The guy has a history to him that I never knew about. Beyond everyone associates him with Lucas and Spielberg and Howard and the great big movies and stuff like that. The man has lived a really fascinating, interesting life, and I recommend the documentary to any of the people out there if they want to watch an interesting documentary. And then is it groundsbreaking or anything like that? No, it's just interesting. It's very a lot of interviews with John, a lot of just breakdown of his history of his life. And the guy's in his 90s and he's lived a full dramatic, very interesting life. And I think he's going to go down as one of the great composers of the 20th century. I think he's going to go I think he's going to rival Bach in the future. Let me put it that way. People will be talking about his music hundreds of years from now, basically.
Okay.
I think
Jonathan, is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that you talked about or mentioned, or a viewpoint that you wanted to make sure you expressed before we kind of wind down?
I have so many viewpoints and opinions. Please invite me back sometime. I love having a reason to talk about movies. But nope, shameless plug. Right now, I have a feature-length documentary, Rocket Ship, playing at the Wichita Falls Museum of Art, Tuesday through Friday at 10, noon, and 2 p.m., and on Saturdays at 1 and 3 p.m. It is about the man who owns the General Mills grain mill over next to Atterbury, and it gives you an interesting alternate perspective on one of the biggest eyesores in our community.
Okay. Okay. As a teenager who absolutely never walked through the empty buildings over there, that I find that interesting. Um, okay, I'm going to mention just a few things that are happening around the area, and it's really just a few things because it's wintertime, it's holiday season, people are taking a break from everything. Riverbend Nature Center is still doing electric critters, a bunch of lighted displays, glittering and sparkling, every Friday and Saturday from 6:30 to 8:30, going through December 21st. Here on campus, we still have the MSU Burns Fantasy of Lights on nightly from dusk until 10, going through Thursday, December 26th. Couple of community theater things happening. Stage 2 Dinner Theater is doing Ken Ludwig's The Games Afoot, which is a Sherlock Holmes dinner theater mystery. And the Wichita Theater is performing Anastasia the Musical. If you'd like to learn more about any of those things that I mentioned or other things that might be going on around campus or in our community, please check out the events on the MSU Texas homepage or the calendar at discoverwichitafalls.com/events. All right, I think that's probably going to do it. Any last comments before we clock out?
Nope. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much for coming. And the idea of having you on again just seems like an obvious thing to do because we spend a lot of time talking about pop culture things that are going to be very much in your wheelhouse, you know? But
Oh.
yeah. All right. So until next time, this has been Club Moffat Talks. See you.